Back now with Joanne Williams, producer of the documentary The Exchange in White America, Kaukauna and King 50 years later. We were talking about the people that you interviewed some years later, 50 years later, after they were in school there. I saw a video clip of you in Milwaukee with Carol Meekins, WTMJ-TV. She was interviewing you. And you played back some of the comments that the people who took part in the experiment said to you after the experiment was long over, and these struck me. From a white woman, I was pretty much astonished at some of the things I saw. From a white man, I started crying because I just felt so uncomfortable. From a black woman, I said, okay, let's go in and see what happens if somebody wants to take my head off. And finally, from a black man, he said there were a number of things that could have happened to this 16-year-old kid in that place, meaning Kaukauna, in 1966. It sounded as though it was eye-opening, but also maybe a little bit frightening of an experience once they got into it, even though they agreed to it.
Oh yes, it was kind of scary.
Yeah.
They didn't know anything about Kaukauna, or the black woman said, how far up north is Kaukauna?
Is that right?
Yes, because she had never been that far. And once they got here, they learned that the people here were not what they expected. They didn't know what to expect, but they were treated okay. And the same thing when the kids from Kaukauna came down to Milwaukee. They lived with black families.
Right.
And they didn't know what to expect either. That's why Joe McCarty said he felt so uncomfortable, because he'd never been out of his own home. Then he'd never been out of Kaukauna for any length of time. And here he was moving into Milwaukee, into the home of a black family. And he didn't know what to expect, but they welcomed him with open arms. And he became very good friends with the mother that he stayed with and kept in touch with her for years afterwards.
Oh my, you said you interviewed some of the students, but you also said you interviewed two of the parents?
Yes.
What were their recollections?
The parents of Joe McCarty from Kaukauna.
He's the white guy from Kaukauna.
He's a white guy from Kaukauna. Okay. They said they let him go because they knew that he can't just stay in a small community. He's got to see more of the world. He's got to get to know people who are different. So when this opportunity came for him, they said, yes, we're going to let you go. On the other hand, from the black students, Phyllis, the woman you talked about, her mother said she had to do a lot of praying to decide whether or not she was going to let her go. And finally she said she knew Phyllis was pretty tough. She was pretty level-headed. She wouldn't let anything get in her way, so she let her go.
Oh my. For those students, did this experiment, and maybe even for you as a student there, did the experiment expose educational disparities between white Kaukauna and black Milwaukee?
Yes, it did. It certainly did.
What did it show? What did you find out that they had that you didn't?
Well, they had Alan Kemp, the black student from Milwaukee, said that the students study harder in Kaukauna.
In Kaukauna.
As he said, because there wasn't a lot else to do in Kaukauna. There weren't as many distractions as there are in the bigger city. The kids who came down to Milwaukee found that the courses were a little different at Rufus King High School, but basically they could handle them all. Rufus King was a neighborhood high school at the time. It's now the International Baccalaureate High School, so you have to test to get into it now. But back then it was just a neighborhood high school. And it was a very good high school. Kaukauna was a very good high school. So the only educational differences were the classes and bell times and that sort of thing. But basically they had the same sort of education, except it was a different social environment.
So it wasn't they have this and we don't.
Not then. Not back then.
Not then.
No.
There was not that disparity.
No.
Was the impact of the experiment felt just at the two schools, or did it bleed over into each community?
It was just at the schools.
Just at the schools?
Yes, in '66. It just took place in the schools, and the families who hosted the students in both communities and some of their close friends were involved. But other than that, it wasn't something that was really part of the larger community.
Yeah, it wasn't known out there.
No, not really.
Yeah.
No.
We are back with more with Joanne Williams, documentary producer. Stay with us where you can see this documentary after this.